Okay, welcome to Life Lessons, where who you are matters more than what you do. This is Dr. Cunningham, and today's episode is going to focus on relationships, love, sex, celibacy. We're just going to have just a conversation today. What I'm going to start with is a post that I recently posted. It actually on Labor Day, 9/5/2022. I just felt led. I'm going to say by the Holy Spirit for those whom are spiritual and or understand the spiritual realm. There are times where there are thoughts that are divine that just literally just kind of pop up in your mind, and you know that it's a healthy thought that is more than just based on what's going on in our everyday world, that has to do with what we see, but it has to do with more than just what we see. And so today's post starts, or I'm starting with this particular post, and it says, there was a gentleman who walked into a store looking for jewelry. He wanted to purchase a diamond ring for his soon to be fiancee. He was so excited as he entered the store. The clarity of the diamonds were impeccable according to the ads. He walked up to the counter and was greeted by the salesperson. He stated, I want a princess cut blue diamond with the best clarity, which is FL, which is the best clarity of diamonds, and at least 4 carats. The salesperson searched for a few and returned to the counter. He began to show the diamonds one by one, but to his dismay, he was not pleased. All the diamonds looked a little cloudy. Finally, he said, Why do the diamonds look so cloudy? My apologies, sir, the salesman said. It looks like someone with dirty hands handled those diamonds. With great disappointment, he walked away from the store. He thought to himself, they obviously had too many people handling those valuable diamonds who didn't know what they had. It's even more a shame because the next person won't even see their value past all the dirt or of the fingerprints on them. So, lesson, know your value. Everyone shouldn't be able to handle someone of great value. And sometimes great work is required before those internal stains can be cleared up. So, let's have a conversation. Now, life lessons is about life and different things that we can encounter, not only that can be a very human experience, but then also incorporating or integrating some of my clinical understanding. And so I've worked with a number of couples. I've been working with couples clinically since 2007. Interestingly enough, there are a lot of times where most of my work has been with families and working clinically with families, so parents and children. But then I realized a lot of times, not to say that all the blame has to be on parents, because that's not what it's about. It's not necessarily about placing blame, it's more about finding the root cause of particular dynamics in order to work on those to improve the life of everyone in the system. So that includes parents who are also couples some of the time, because there are couples who co-parent, or excuse me, parents who co-parent who aren't couples. But for the sake of the clinical treatment that I provided, my very first couple that I recall was a girl in a residential facility, and she had some concerns with like bipolar behaviors. She was quite aggressive as well. But then when I learned more about her family situation and the reason that led to her having suicidal ideations and having gone to the hospital and stay at the subacute unit for a period of time, had to do with her witnessing domestic violence between her mother and father. Now, the mother and father, I ended up meeting with them, and of course, being able to address things regarding their parenting, but also their relationship as a couple. Why was it so volatile? Mom was dealing with her own anxiety, trauma, and literally was having panic attacks. But then, even though father was the one that was imposing the violent acts onto the mom, he also had his own childhood traumas because he witnessed domestic violence between his mother and his father and was also beaten horribly. When I say abused as a child, he was abused himself. And even later on in his life, an emergence of schizophrenia occurred. So there was a lot of mental health concerns as well as physical violence that was present in the household between the two parents. as well as the child witnessing it, which led to literally an entire system that was dealing with its own trauma and violence. And so I say that to say that I've worked with the extreme of the situations, but then I also have worked with those who have just had connection concerns in their relationships. But then I believe that's something that all of us can, say that we've, at some point experienced that, right? Have had concerns with regards to connection and what that means for us and why was a connection not as strong as we had hoped it would be. So I say that all to say is that sometimes through life, we can lose sight of value depending on how one is handled. So I know I utilize the diamond as an example of, how one handles you and how people handle you in your life and how that affects one's value. Now, it doesn't actually affect your value, but what it does is that it can create some smudges. And I always talk about it from the perspective of clarity, having to do with how we view ourselves, how we see ourselves, as it has to do with not only what we say about ourselves, but what other people have said about us or done with us, and then we adopt as our own thought because obviously and sometimes the mind says, well, there must be something true about that because otherwise that wouldn't have happened to me. But I also want to be able to say to you that that is not the truth. Just because someone says something to you that was negative doesn't mean that it has to be a thought that you accept, because you do have value. And at the same time, too, there are times where everyone has had situations where they realize they could have done things differently in their own relationships. So then there's a part of guilt and shame that one is dealing with. So having to work through that in order to get to a place where they feel like they are able to be trusted in a relationship themselves. Now, I say all of that to say because there's so much that goes on behind the scenes, literally the unseen parts of people, which have to do with our thoughts and our feelings toward ourselves, which is the reason why I always talk about how important relationships with self is. And that's something that I've been talking about from the very beginning of my career, because I really do believe in individuals being able to have a great relationship with themselves so that when they show up in their relationships with others, they're showing up as their best selves. And even when they're not at their best, and they can have a level of awareness of where they are in order to be able to know what work that they need to do personally. And then also to be able to create some barriers or boundaries to know, are they in a position or a place to show up in a relationship in the way that they can. And if they need something, for them to be able to say what they need. Or if they don't have any needs, be able to say what they want. But with that being said, there are relationships that, sometimes people go through, and now it could be that in the beginning there was love, and that it really was, and it appeared as love. But then it may have shifted into something else that led to a great trauma. So then, for someone to be in a situation like that, for them to open up their heart to the next person that potentially could be a great love in their life could be tough. But at the same time, when you add on, the analogy of the diamond being touched by dirty hands is, does everyone or should everyone have an opportunity to be able to have access to your body if you're not even sure if you could trust them with their heart? And Dr. C says, and this is just Dr. C 101. I'm not telling you what to do, but what I'm saying is that if the person can't be trusted with my heart, they're not getting my body, because the heart and the body is one package. How about that? So when you know who you are, when you know your value, when you expect to be treated a certain way, now it doesn't mean people can, don't have their things that they're working on with regards to their disrespect. So there are some people that are going to be disrespectful, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that I have to give them the time of day. It doesn't mean that I'm going to sit there and be in their presence and allow it to continue. No, when a person respects himself enough, even if they're a person that wants to keep peace, that means that maybe they, until that other person decides that they're no longer going to be disrespectful, or maybe even after that, if they've been disrespectful enough, then that means they no longer are allowed in that sphere of space with that particular person. They don't get a chance to even be disrespectful again. They don't get an opportunity to be able to have access like a person would, that is showing up respectfully, that is showing up ready to be in a healthy situation. Now, sometimes that can be tough because there are plenty of those that I've worked with that have had exes that they have had to co-parent with. So what happens when you're dealing with somebody who you got to deal with because there's some kids involved, or maybe mutual friends? That's a tough situation, but there still can be boundaries. But again, knowing your value knows is knowing when someone is being disrespectful, and then also, you handling yourself in a way that does not allow someone to have access to thinking that it's okay to continue it, or even if it's in their own mind, but it's still not allowing yourself to be in that space. But again, if I go to the perspective of not only the boundaries within relationships and valuing yourself, knowing your value, and then also expecting that value to be honored by others, it is through conversation. It is through who you allow to have access to your body to be with you sexually. I mean, I am a clinician. I work with relationships, and when discussing marriage, a lot of times sex isn't part of the conversation, or when working with couples, depending on one's belief. Again, I'm a Christian, so I do believe that marriage and sex, is the context in which sex occurs. At the same time, it doesn't mean that there aren't individuals that, maybe have experienced it prior to marriage. I'm not here to judge. All I'm saying is that it's important to know who you're going to be with, and if they truly do value you, or if it's just for a moment. Um, Again, from my perspective, sex is definitely a spiritual act. It's not just a natural act. And this is a conversation I've had at dinner tables plenty of times with family members, just having conversations about it, because when you're connecting to someone, you're not just connecting with them and the potential of the positive as well as the weaknesses of their body, literally, and being exposed to that, but it also has to do with where they are mentally and emotionally, where they are spiritually. So everything that has to do with what's great about them, as well as their areas of growth, or maybe even their dysfunctions, are all being released in your body. And so to me, that's something that is very important to be mindful of when you're deciding upon whom you're going to be with. Now, there's no such thing as a perfect person. So each and every one of us have something that we're going to be working on. So I'm not saying look for perfection, but then when you incorporate already having to deal with the greatness of a person and embodying the within your own body and your spirit and your soul, of the greatness of that person as well as the dysfunctions of that person, and then you add on the greatness and the dysfunction of every other person or partner that they've been with, whether they were there for just the sex or there because they were in a great relationship. Literally, it's like it's a very interesting thing to think about. And I know it's not something that a lot of people think about now, and it's definitely not necessarily the culture of the way that things occur, but I still see the importance of it because I see how that affects relationships. It's not popular to have this discussion. I mean, nowadays, females are more forthright regarding what they want from their partners, from their male partners, or whoever their partners, whatever gender they decide to be with, are very forthright and very honest, and are the ones that are on the prowl more than guys are. It's not as traditional as things once were, but at the same time, I could see how when I meet with a couple in therapy, whether they're married or not, how when we're having conversations, I'm not just working with them in and of themselves, but I'm working with them in their frame of reference with regards to their previous partners. And so sometimes there's even blockages to people being able to truly accept love, or because of the fact that they put up a wall because of the two or three partners they had before they got to the person who really loves them and wants the best for their life. And so it's an interesting situation when having to acknowledge that there's a love right in front of you. Someone wants to be with you and love all of you, your flaws and all. But somehow the person not being able to accept that because they got used to being mishandled and misused and abused. And that to me is sad. That's sad to think that someone could lose a situation that could actually be great of great benefit to their life, a hub for healing and growth. Not to say that they should rely on their partner to be that growth for them, because they should be willing to do their own work, which is the reason why I always say couples, when they're together or even before they get married, they should be going through not only couples counseling, but they should be going through their own individual therapy. Because as sure as I'm sitting here, there are certain perceptions that if they're going to break down those perceptions and unlearn to relearn again, it's going to require their own personal work before they can actually get into a situation where they can hear and see their partner for the purity of what they're saying, rather than seeing it through a filter that had to do with somebody else that had no business having access to their heart. But at the end of the day, relationships can be a hub, an ecosystem of growth. When there are two healthy people that get together, that are aware of their greatness as well as aware of their patterns, and are constantly willing to work on them, communicate about it, and they're loved and the connection is real, then the nurturing of that relationship, the environment of that relationship creates such a hub of nurturing that the two people can't help but to thrive in their lives. Period. That's how great relationships can be, but it requires two people who are constantly doing their own personal work, aware of themselves, showing up with the best of themselves, being honest when they're in a space where they may not be able to, in order to consistently move forward. Now, I know this is easier said than done. Relationships require work. It's hard work. The toughest job in the world, I believe, is being a parent. But then I also would say, in general, the toughest, situation to be involved in is a relationship. To truly be in a relationship where there's love and care, and even when being upset, to not utilize that as fuel and as a reason to be aggressive. That takes great emotional maturity, which is the reason why relationships really are for those who are mature. Now, people can dibble and dabble and learn, and I'm not saying you can't learn through relationships, but a true healthy relationship is had between mature people. Now, I didn't put an age to that because I'm not saying it has to do with an age, but psychologically and emotional maturity, the ability to communicate what it is you're thinking and you're feeling and what you need and what you want, is necessary to be in a healthy relationship. Now, the hope is that that's learned through one's food, or it's the acronym for family of origin. But at the same time, some people learn dysfunctional habits through their families of origin. So it's having to unlearn to relearn new ways of being able to show up in a relationship in a healthy way, so that it doesn't end up affecting a situation that could have been a great situation for them relationally. And so at the end of the day, whether someone's starting in a relationship or restarting in love in relationships, or rekindling and repairing a relationship, all of it requires work. But also, all of it requires being aware of what it is that you bring as far as your value, but then also knowing what you will accept and what you won't accept. And then also being aware of if a person really is worth you giving your heart and body to, because they should not be separate.